Anyway, so once my parents realized that I wasn't just, it wasn't one of those things that you get and you become disinterested in it after a couple of weeks. They got me a drum set that was a little bit more, not exactly professional grade, but they were real drums. They were just small for me, I guess I was drawn to them, or they were drawn to me, or something. You know how they say the music finds you, and then you go with it. So I guess I took to it pretty naturally, and I could play. I could play. And in my neighborhood where I was growing up, there were quite a few musicians that were also children. And, this guy played the bass, this guy played the guitar, this guy played the keyboards, that sort of thing. And so we found each other and we started, jamming, doing stuff like that. And we started playing for talent shows. And what they had back then in our neighborhood, they had block parties where they would block off the street, and you'd set up on a little homemade pallet or something, and people would come out in their yards and sit in chairs, and we'd be playing. And we weren't playing jazz at that time. We were playing what they called soul music. So we were playing music from, Sly and the Family Stone, James Brown, Kool and the Gang, stuff like that, But at the same time that was going on in my house, my father was listening to people like Max Roach, Sonny Rollins, Jackie McLean, Jimmy Smith, Horace Silver, and so Miles Davis, and so I was hearing all that music at home, and so I gravitated towards that from a drums point of view, because my father was always talking to me about Max Roach and Art Blakey and Philly Joe Jones and those people, and as a little kid also I was drawn to the drums because of actually my favorite drummer at that time was Buddy Rich, because Buddy Rich was on television, and Max Roach and Art Blakey and Philly Joe Jones were not on television. And so so my parents, they would let me, I'd look in the TV guide. Remember the TV guide, the small TV guide? I'd look in the TV guide and see if he was going to be on, because he was on, Hollywood Palace. Remember that show? It was called Hollywood Palace, and the Merv Griffin Show, and Mike Douglas, and, of course, Johnny Carson, Playboy After Dark, which was on really late. And they didn't really want me to watch that, but I could watch his segment and then I had to go to bed. But anyway, so I was into the drums and the whole thing, and that's kind of how it happened.
So I noticed that as you became more mature, that major musicians took you under their wing and had you work with them. I mean, you worked with Horace Silver. Tell us about that era when you were first starting out.
Okay, so yeah, well, after I moved to New York.
And what brought you to New York?
Well, I always wanted to come to New York to play jazz and be around people that like-minded people and that sort of thing. So after I finished school, I came back to where I was growing up and started establishing myself as a freelance drummer and that sort of thing. And then basically, I joined a top 40 band called the Squares, and we were a top 40 band, and what that meant back then was that you played for dancers. You know, we had a regular 5-night-a-week gig where we played for dancers, and we learned 2 songs off the radio every week, and we played for I don't know, Huey Lewis and the News, Billy Ocean, Prince, the Pretenders, just whatever was on the radio, you know, and living was very inexpensive at that time, and I saved up enough money to move to New York after 4 years of doing that, and I just did it. I just moved to New York, and I got to New York, and I was lucky that I ended up getting work pretty much right away. I didn't have to go through, working at Dunkin' Donuts or any of that kind of stuff. I was really fortunate, and I got to start working. And then, the word got around. Word gets around when there's new people. And at that time, I was really lucky because people like you were saying, Horace Silver and Joe Henderson and Bobby Hutcherson and Buster Williams and Sonny Rollins, and those kind of people were still very much on the scene then, right? And they were in the position to hire young upstarts like myself, and then you not only would you learn how to play better because they were so much better because they were the people that created it. They were the ones that invented what I was trying to do. So I was fortunate that I apprenticed with those kinds of people, and it helped me so much. Sometimes I look back on it and I can't even believe it, but it helped me so much to learn how to play and learn how to be a professional musician and learn the ins and outs of what was then the music business. It's very much changed since then, because there's no chances right now not as much for people to apprentice with people like that. You can still play with people that are older than you and better than you, but those kinds of people, Horace Silver, Sonny Rollins, J.J. Johnson, they're in the same category as the person that we just saw the film about, Max Roach. So I was really fortunate.
I don't mean to interrupt the flow, but will you tell us your name?
I'm sorry, I thought, yeah, Billy Drummond. Billy Drummond. I'm sorry, So Billy actually played here with the Mike Lee Quartet when we had International Day in Jazz. I think it was 2 years ago or a year ago. No, 2 years ago. So when I saw that he had a contact with Max Roach, I said, he's the man. I'm so sorry for not saying his name. So, but that is an important part of the older musicians hiring the younger musicians to grow into their positions, and this is a good example of how that has happened. The fact that he worked with Sonny Rollins and these great musicians. And what was that like to work with Sonny Rollins? He was in the movie, as you said.
Well, it was daunting, frightening, but it was a great honor, and I have to say that any of these people that I work with of that stature, Horace, J.J. Johnson, Freddie Hubbard, Bobby Hutcherson, Steve Kuhn, Carla Bley, Nat Adderley, Joe Henderson, these people, I didn't solicit the work that from them. They called me, or they got in touch with me, or they found out about me somehow. And with Sonny, it was really interesting because he was one of those people that, like some of the people that I work with, I sort of dreamed about working with them. You know, I'd be laying in the bed when I was 14, 15 years old in my parents' house, in my bedroom, looking at the back of the record covers. Oh, wow, man.
Just like Max did.
Freddie Hubbard, wow, you know, I would love to play with him. But Sonny was so far up that I didn't even think that I would. It was like out of the. It wasn't even reachable. It wasn't obtainable for me to play with somebody like that. You know, Sonny Rollins is like, you know, Coltrane, Miles, Dizzy, Charlie Parker. You know, he's way up there in the stratosphere. So anyway, when I got the call to play with him, it was completely out of the blue. The phone just rang, and he, you know, he has this voice, as you could hear. Okay, you know, Billy, you know. so I'm like thinking somebody's kind of putting me on, you know. But I, you know, answered the questions, and he said, you know, we're going to be playing. I want you to come and play with us at this rehearsal studio called SIR in Manhattan. And I thought, wow, you know, okay, you know, yeah, I'll come and play with Sonny Rollins, you know, right? So I get there, and you know, I'm on cloud nine, thinking, you know, man, Sonny Rollins called me to come play with him. How does he even know I exist, you know? And so I show up, and I'm getting ready to go into the building, and I see another drummer coming out that I knew, and he's coming out, and he's, hey, you know, hey, what's happening? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I'm gonna play with Sonny Rollins, man. He called me to play with him, and the guy goes, yeah, I just got through playing with him. And I'm like, what? What's going on? And then I come to the realization that this is an audition. This isn't him inviting me to come play with him. He's auditioning, you know, 100 other guys, you know. So it was too late by then to freak out about the fact that I was being auditioned. So I just, you know, I was there. I was like about ready to open the door to go in. So I just went in. I just figured, okay, I'll just do what I do and enjoy the experience of being able to play Olio or Doxy or one of the, you know, tunes that we know Sonny Rollins wrote and I had heard all my life. And so I did, and it ended up that he did hire me. And for about 2.5-3 years I played with him. And it was a thrilling experience because all of the drummers that I loved had played with Sonny Rollins, you know, Max, Art Blakey, Roy Haynes, Philly Joe Jones, Arthur Taylor, Kenny Clark, Tony Williams, Jack DeJohnette, Al Foster, Billy Higgins. The list goes on and on and on. And so I just try to do my best, and you know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to be playing the drums and having this guy, Sonny Rollins, standing right there with his saxophone, looking right at you, demanding that you play, because he's playing, you know, and he likes to trade eights and trade fours for sometimes a half an hour, 45 minutes, just drums and saxophone. And so you have to conjure up all the creative energy that you can to be able to participate with him in that context. And so I have all these memories of hearing Philly Joe Jones and Max Roach and Art Blakey and Billy Higgins and Kenny Clark trading with him. And so I'm trying to go in that zone with my idols, playing with this idol. So that's kind of what it was like in a nutshell. He's up there, like I said, with Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Miles, Dizzy, Bud Powell, Monk. That's it for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So now we'll talk about Max Roach, but I do want to point out that, as Noel Cohen had pointed out to me, what's amazing when you're a jazz drummer, you've got four things working, right? Your arm, your hands, your feet, and everything's doing something different. Okay, it's not like just getting up and playing the trumpet. No, everything is moving in different parts, and so it's truly remarkable. Really. Does anybody else here have drumming experience? Don't be afraid to raise your hand. All right, okay, terrific, okay. All right, so now, so what about Max Roach? How did you get interested in Max? And then I want to hear, we'd like to hear about how you met him.
Okay. Well, how I got interested in him is due to my father, because my father's born in 1925, so he's around the same age group as Max and Philly Joe Jones and Roy Haynes, Elvin Jones, Art Blakey, man born in the mid-20s, and so he had this record collection, and he had more than a few records with Max Roach on them. And like I said, when I was a little kid, I was drawn to Buddy Rich because Buddy Rich was on television, and he was, when you're a young person, you're drawn to the most spectacular thing, shiny thing, and Buddy Rich was and still is one of my favorite drummers, and he was a great drummer, without question. Maybe, he billed himself as the world's greatest drummer, and maybe he was. I mean, he was really incredible. But my father was drawn more to Max and Art Blakey and Philly Joe, and even before them, he was drawn to Chick Webb and Big Sid Catlett. And so that's how I first heard about Max Roach and Gretsch drums and the whole bit. And then as I started getting more and more mature and more involved in the music, I began to gravitate towards those people, towards Max Roach, Art Blakey, Philly Joe. And that was more of the music that I liked, more so than the music that Buddy Rich played. And so I was drawn more to the music that Max Roach and those people played, like Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Rollins, Jackie McLean. And so Max became my idol, one of my idols. But he was more approachable from a technical standpoint for me as a drummer, mainly because of his melodicism on the drums and his musicality on the drums. Buddy Rich was more like a machine gun, more like no one could really approach that. He was a freak, he was like you can't really do that, a few people were able to do that sort of thing. But Max brought this sort of elegance and musicality and deep intellectual way of playing the instrument that resonated with me, and so I became a disciple of his from a distance. I was still a kid and a teenager and all that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, I wrote him 2 fan letters when I was, 12, 13, 14 years old. And because at that time, sometimes on the backs of the albums, it would say in a little corner at the corner of the album, it would say, if you'd like to write to Max Roach, you can be, write to him at, Post Office Box, blankety blank, at Radio City Music, blah, 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 New York, New York. So I did, I wrote to him twice. And oddly enough, this is about maybe 10 years ago, this guy named Larry Applebaum reached out to me on Facebook saying, hi, I'm Larry Applebaum. I'm the curator at the Library of Congress, and we have been given all of Max's personal contracts, his tapes, all of his family had given the Library of Congress all of Max's personal things and gear, all kinds of stuff. And he said, and we found in his things 2 letters that you wrote to him. And I had forgotten all about this because this is a long time ago. This is like, I don't know how long ago, 50 years ago that this has happened. I had completely forgotten about it. And anyway, he did say that because it was now property of the Library of Congress, that he couldn't photograph them or mimeograph them or whatever, photocopy them and give them to me because it was now the property of the U.S. government. But that if I ever came down to Washington, D.C., that he would gladly let me come in and go through the archives and see what I said. And so I'm very curious as to what I might have said, because I was 14, 13 years old, and I was gobbling up everything that was going on around in terms of music, in terms of the social aspect of things, and I was a little radical maybe in my beliefs, and I had some thoughts about the way the world was and society, and I felt like I could express myself that way to Max because I knew that he stood for a lot of the things that I was interested in and wanted to find out about. Plus, he was my idol in terms of just playing the drums. And I tried to sound like him. I ended up, I always wanted to play Gretsch drums because a guy here was asking me if they still made Gretsch drums. I always wanted to play Gretsch drums because of Max, because of Art Blakey, because of Kenny Clark, because of Philly Joe. All these guys were in Downbeat advertising Gretsch drums. And so when I was able to buy my first Gretsch drum set, I bought a Gretsch drum set, and I've been with them since 1979 now. And so Max is, he's just a huge inspiration. So the first time I met him, I think, was in the 70s. I just went to go see him play, and I just met him as one of the many people that were going up to him and shaking his hand. And then when I moved to New York, I was working with Horace Silver, and we were in Brazil, in Rio, playing. They had a jazz festival there called the Free Jazz Festival, and I was playing with Horace Silver, and Max was there. I knew he was on the festival, but I didn't know he was in the audience because I had seen him on the plane, and I was just in awe of him. Wow, man.
That must have really freaked you out.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, and so then at the end of the concert, I was in the backstage area taking down my drums. I think I was on my hands and knees, and I felt this hand on my shoulder, and I looked up, and it was him, and I was freaking out. But anyway, the next day, this is a funny thing. The next day, we were in the hotel cafeteria or restaurant, and Max was there, and of course I went up to him to say hello, and I said, Mr. Roach, I said, I've been trying to play like you and sound like you my whole life, and I just want to know how do you get that sound on the instrument? How do you get that tone, and how do you what do you do to get that sound? And I was expecting him to because he's very professorial and very upright and just stoic and just, you know, he just had a vibe that was just so commanding and, you know, so I was expecting this sort of professorial type of response, like, well, you have to make sure, young man, that you tune the drums and you make sure that you set up and use the right sticks and, you know, all these kind of technical things. And so I said, how do you get that sound? And he just looked at me and goes, you gotta hit them motor scooters. I'll just say motor scooters. But that wasn't the word he used. And so that short little answer was so profound, and it made perfect sense. And he said the perfect thing to me to make me understand what I had to do to get the sound out of the instrument. And that could mean many things, that little phrase, you gotta hit them, you know what. But it just means intent, purpose, mean what you say. That's what it really struck me as meaning. And so that was my first real super meaningful moment and words of wisdom from him. And then there was several others after that.
Okay, so you also played at a club called Bradley's. Does anybody here remember Bradley's in New York City? It was a piano club where musicians would go after they finished their gig, and it was not exactly in the village. It was like
Well, it was on University
on
Place.
University
Yeah,
Place,
yeah.
right? So it was a great place to hang. And so Billy was playing there, and guess what?
How do you know about this?
I do my research.
Okay, all right. Well, so what had happened? I was playing at Bradley's, and like Lynne was saying, it was a place. This was in the '80s and early '90s. It was a place when New York was a late night town. It's not so much anymore. Now all the gigs start at 7:30. You're home by 11:30. You know, it's just, you can still watch the news when you get home. But back then, the gigs didn't start till 9:30, and Bradley's started at 9:45, and the last set was at 1:45. That's when it started. So, like she was saying, people would get off playing at the Vanguard or Sweet Basil's or Fat Tuesdays, any of the clubs that were around back then. They'd get off at 1:30, and then they could go somewhere else and hear people play and have a drink or whatever they're going to do and hang out, blah, 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 see their friends, and hear another whole set. And then after that, the hang was really on at 4, 5. You know. Anyway, so I was playing there on a Sunday night, and it was the last set. We were going to play the last set, and no one was hardly there. It was a Sunday night. It was kind of like, you know, like you're thinking, well, at least I was thinking, well, nobody's coming in. Wendy, the club owner, is probably going to say, you guys can go on home. Nobody's here. It's the last set. You know, we'll see if anybody comes in. But nobody, it doesn't seem like anybody's going to come in. So that's what I was thinking. So I don't, and I didn't ever usually drink if I have to play. And I still don't. And I don't even drink hardly anything a glass of wine or something now. But back then, I had a fondness for cognac. And so it was on the break, and I'm thinking, well, we got to, you know, we're through, and nobody's going to come in, so I'm not going to have to play anymore. So I think I'll have a cognac and a Heineken together. Because I think I'm not going to have to play, right? So I'm sitting at the bar, and, you know, time goes by, and, you know, the cognac and the Heineken are starting to take effect. And, you know, I'm thinking, well, pretty soon I'll just take the drums down and, you know, go home. And all of a sudden I hear all this commotion at the entrance of the club, which is at the end of the bar, and I'm at this end. and I hear these people. I'm thinking, oh man, we're gonna have to play. Golly, and I've been sipping a little bit, and I can't play if I have just one sip of any kind of alcohol. I can't play. I can't. Everything feels like rubber. It's terrible. So I'm thinking, oh, who are these people? I hope maybe they won't, the cover charge will deter them from coming in. But they come in, and oh man. And so I see them coming towards me, and I hear the people say, who's playing, blah, blah, blah. Oh, blah, 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 da, 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 Billy Drummond's playing drums. And I hear somebody go, oh yeah, I want to hear him. And I'm going, oh. And so I see these people coming towards me, and it's like an entourage, 4 or 5 people. And I see this one person, and it's Max Roach. And I'm like, oh no. Oh my God, what have I done? You know, the worst thing could imaginable to have happened. And you know, my drums, the piano's like there, and the drums are right here. And a table is right here, and he's set right there. I could do this and touch his, you know.
I remember that table.
Yeah.
I sat there.
And he sat right there with 3 or 4 other people.
Oh, no.
And I had to play. And I tell you what, I was so shaken and frightened that I sobered up. I was too scared to be buzzed any kind of way. And I did my best. I played, but he was super sweet, super nice. He signed. I didn't bring him. I should have brought him. He signed my hi-hat cymbals, and he was the nicest. He was just like what you would imagine your idol to be like Babe Ruth or Mickey Mantle or Joe Louis or Willie Mays. You know, it's like, you know, if you dream about those people and dream about meeting them, the dreams would be the kind of thing that you would want, and that's what he was. He was just like a dream, just like a. And so anyway, and then later on, I saw him maybe a couple of years later, and he remembered that, and he told me that I played my blank off, and that was real encouragement as well. So. Yeah, he was, you know, you know, in watching that film, a lot of the things just reminded me so much of my father and that time and all of the experiences that I had playing with those kinds of people, JJ and Sonny Rollins and Horace, and they were really, 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 really special. And I just feel so fortunate to have been around them and them letting me make music with them. It's beyond any of my wildest expectations.
So you are special. So you brought your drums, and we are so grateful that you did that. So we would love to hear you perform, and if you want to show us some techniques that Max would do, or your own thing, whatever you'd like to do. And if you want to point things out about the drums, because not everybody knows all the drums and all the things that go on in a jazz concert. So here you go.
All right. Well, I can't play like Max Roach, even though I've always tried to play like him and all the other great drummers that I have admired all my whole career. There's hundreds, but you know, there's a few of us have determined that there's a there's seven, we call them the Magnificent Seven of the modern jazz drummers. Kenny Clark, who basically was at the forefront of modern jazz, bebop, along with Max. So Kenny Clark, Max Roach, Art Blakey, Philly Joe Jones, Roy Haynes, Elvin Jones, and Tony Williams. And from those seven in modern jazz, everyone kind of comes from. Now, I didn't include Buddy Rich, I didn't include Gene Krupa, I didn't include Chick Webb, I didn't include Sid Catlett, Papa Joe Jones, Louis Bellson, because they're not part of this next movement, this bebop movement that Dizzy and Charlie Parker and Bud Powell and Thelonious Monk started up at Minton's and different places in New York City. So I'm not saying that they're not great drummers. So I'm just talking about the seven, the Magnificent Seven drummers that basically are responsible for the way everybody plays the drums post, let's say 1944, 1945. So Max's contribution to it, from my point of view, was, like I said before, his melodicism, the way he made the drums play melody, and it wasn't so much based on, you know, flash and speed, even though he had that as well. But it brought the drums to the forefront with a deeper understanding of the drums as a musical instrument. And so what he did was, when you heard him play a solo, you could hear the song. You could hear, if he played the solo on a blues, a 12-bar blues, you could hear the blues, you could hear the form. He's playing the same form as the pianist or the saxophonist or the trumpet player. If you hear him play a standard song, Stella by Starlight, I Love You, you hear him play the form. If you hear him play on rhythm changes, I Got Rhythm Changes, George Gershwin, which many songs are based on that same chord structure. You hear him play the song, the two A's, 8 bars A, 8 bars A, 8 bars bridge, 8 bars A going home. And these songs were based on his rhythmic and melodic themes that he had available to him in terms of tone. And a tone is a note in this case. A note is a tone, and a tone is a note. So the tone of all these drums, we could consider them as notes. So Max was at the forefront of utilizing the drum set. He used to call it the 4-limb monster, because you play it with all 4 limbs. It's one of the only instruments that you do that with. Maybe the organ might be one, maybe the harp, but the harp uses it to tune. They don't really play them with their feet. They use it to tune the feet, to tune the instrument. So the drums you actually play with all 4 limbs. And so it's a completely American instrument, and it's devised of several instruments. This is a snare drum with the snares off, with the snares on. It's that. And then this is a mounted tom-tom, and this is the floor tom.